everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. I am so excited to be here with you all today because not only do we have an amazing guest that we're going to be talking about all things creativity, storytelling, amplifying creativity, but I also, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank each and every single one of you for your support. Today is our 200th episode of My Ed Tech Life, and it has been quite an amazing journey. 3 years in the making, and I couldn't think of a better person to have on the show and talking about a wonderful topic, which I absolutely love, and I am a huge proponent of about amplifying creativity. So thank you all, as always, for all of your support, all the shares, the likes, the follows, all of you that are subscribing to our obviously our podcast, subscribing to us on YouTube. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. It really means a lot that we've been able to bring some great conversations into our learning community, into our PLF, my personal learning family. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart. And tonight we have, like I mentioned, a great guest, and we're going to have just an amazing conversation. So Tanya Avrith is here joining us tonight. Tanya, how are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm so happy and I'm so honored to be your 200th guest. Like that's insane. I can't imagine doing 200 of anything. This is a huge accomplishment. So congratulations to you and thank you for having me. And it's really nice to like meet you in person and like be here. So thank you so much and hi to everybody. Hi.
Yes, absolutely. Again, I'm very excited. Been a huge fan and a follower of yours for many years. The things that you've been able to put out, and even helping with my district too, as well, bringing some professional development through Adobe in the summers. You and Clara, and then of course Dom, and we've had them do those trainings, and it's just been wonderful to be able to share the amazing Adobe awesome sauce, and of course the amplification of creativity, which I think to me is something that is very important, and very much needed in our classrooms today and from here on out. As we know, the technology is going to get better and better each time. So thank you so much for being here. So before we get started with just the meat of the conversation, Tanya, for some audience members that may be joining us this evening or catching this on the replay that may not be familiar with your work yet, if you can give us a brief introduction and your context in the education space, that would be amazing.
Well, absolutely. So I have been working in the education space as a teacher slash coach slash, I guess, consultant, strategist since it's about almost 18 years now. So education is my life. I'm the co-author of the Google Infused Classroom with my best friend and sister, Holly Clark, and the Microsoft Infused Classroom. And I'm really excited for her because she's about to launch a new book coming out, the AI Infused Classroom, which is not mine, but like so proud of my girl. And I am also an education evangelist slash strategist on the education team at Adobe and have been working with them for the past 4 years. Prior to coming on board at Adobe, I was teaching. I've worked as a consultant. I've helped support and worked as an instructional technology coach at a district in Montreal. So I've wore many different hats. But my favorite hat is, of course, being a teacher. That's where I think my heart and soul lies. So that's a little bit about me.
Excellent. Well, that's so great, because everything that you've done, and like I said, I've been following you for as long as probably I've been on Twitter, and then I've known who you are. And you definitely are just amazing in everything that you've done, your work, your authorship, all of those great things. But again, I really want to say thank you for your role in Adobe that currently hold, and sharing just amplification of creativity through Adobe and the importance of that. And not only yourself, but the opportunity that I've had to work alongside Claudio in the Creative Institutes. And then, of course, the plethora of Adobe evangelists that are out there. And of course, I had Ben Forta on the
Yes.
show, earlier, and he speaks so highly of every single one of you. So I'm just really thankful that you're here, and we're definitely going to talk a little bit about the ACE, the Creative Institutes as well. But the main thing that I really wanted to talk about is, again, amplification of creativity, and the storytelling process in the classrooms. And I think how that can help significantly a child's learning. And not only that, but I always believe that once you enhance that learning process, that's something that they take with them forever, and it essentially becomes part of who they are. So there's a lot of things that I definitely want to touch on. So first of all, how would you define storytelling in the education space, and what is the role that it plays within the classrooms?
Okay, so I'm a few things that I want to kind of get out in the open as I discuss like storytelling and kind of contextualizing it through the lens of teaching and learning. So I have dyslexia. I'm dyslexic, and I actually realized that, or I guess like was diagnosed, or however you would frame it, as an adult. And so growing up, I was really creative and really like very much a divergent thinker, but like struggled in some of like a lot of my learning, and then like was brilliant in other like in other parts of my learning, right? So like I'm an incredible historian. Like I can look at systems and like understand them on like such a complex way, and like I can see things like very high level. And then when it comes to like things that are so easy for other people to do, like writing a paper, like writing an email, like I writing a blog post, I literally would like have a heart attack and just be like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And so I was can I say the S word? I won't say it. I was a terrible test taker, like horrible as a kid, but I was like really good student. My teachers loved me. I was really creative. So all of these pieces like didn't make sense to me. I was able to go through school. I wrote 2 books because the way I think and the partners that I have in the work that I do. But as I realized this let's say that I've realized this since my son has gone into school. So he's a 6th grader. When he entered kindergarten and we started getting him tested, I realized, okay, and there's genetics in part with dyslexia, right? So when we realized that like Gabby has dyslexia, I realized, oh my God, I have dyslexia, and started doing a lot of work around like, what does that mean? What does it look like? What people don't realize is that dyslexia affects about 20% of students like sitting in a room. So very often it's misdiagnosed or undiagnosed, or it's like coded as something else because it's on a spectrum. So a lot of people don't get it. And I'm getting to my point with storytelling because it's connected. And so what I realized in the last few years, and where I think I became like mama bear, like kind of crazy about, was because ultimately, and then by the way, just like I'm giving you my life story, but I moved from Montreal, Canada to South Florida 9 years ago. And I worked in education in Canada and then came here as a consultant, worked in a lot of private schools. And then when I took my role in Adobe, like really I support a lot of public schools. And the system is so different here than it is back home, like where I'm from. So as a mom, as a parent, I had to also then learn how to navigate a system that really relies on testing as its main measure for like success, when we know that like asking a child with dyslexia to take a test as their only format of assessment is not going to be an accurate representation of what they know, because do they understand the content, or are they like misled by the test, because the test is actually designed to mislead them in terms of writing and reading, right? So I became like fiercely passionate on a crazy level around having these conversations about alternative assessments. And where does storytelling come in? Well, storytelling in my mind is really the opportunity for students to be able to demonstrate their learning using different methods, right? So if a student needs to be able to articulate their understanding through pressing record and articulating that they understand conceptually what they're learning using a video or using a visual representation, creating a slideshow, creating an infographic, so all those pieces come into play, because the way I define that storytelling piece is really connected to the way that we allow students to use alternative means to demonstrate their learning. And we know, because we're human, that story is how we actually make sense of the world. So it makes sense that if we're going to provide learners with opportunities to show what they know through stories, and stories that are meaningful for them, they are going to learn better. And that makes sense for them. Metacognitively, that makes sense for the way that we approach teaching and learning. So I hope that makes sense. I know that's a long story to kind of explain that, but like, I think it's important to understand that journey, because that's where I think it's not just like nice to have. It's like essential for so many kids that sit in our classes. It's not optional.
No, and everything that you said, it just takes me back to when I was in the classroom in my 5th grade, 6th grade classrooms, where you're absolutely right. Myself just being not big a fan of writing, but I would love to talk and talk through, what I've learned.
Well, you have a podcast now. Look at this.
Yes.
It makes sense.
Exactly. So it makes sense. And that's why, like, I invite amazing guests such as yourself, because I want to learn, but I want to learn, in a conversational manner. Sometimes, for me, it's just very hard to sit down and really, pick up a book. And yeah, I'll go through the book, but sometimes that storytelling aspect and hearing it straight from the source. And, for me, it really honestly feels like it really does become part of me. And so, going back to what you're saying, when I was in the classroom, we had just, had Chromebooks in our district, and there was only 2 Chromebook carts. And I was that one teacher that checked out the one Chromebook cart all year. I just signed it out all year, and it lived in, because the other teachers, they weren't familiar with the tech, or they just didn't, they were, it was something that was so new. But what I found is how important that piece of tech was to help many of my students, because I had students that were emergent bilinguals, and students that had needed additional supports, things of that sort. But just putting the Chromebooks in their hands and saying, "Hey, I want you to show me your learning in the way that you feel comfortable with." And I was just experimenting. And honestly, I felt like I was really taking a risk, because up until that, it's always paper assessment, fill in the blanks, bubble in sheet. But when I would give them just these assignments with a rubric, but then stating, you can either show me, record yourself doing maybe a screencast, creating an infographic, creating just some sort of slide presentation. It was amazing, where I saw that my students were acquiring the proper vocabulary language because they were practicing. And I had students that were just brand new, recently coming. That was their first year in the school, emergent bilinguals, but their language, that growth from the beginning of the year till the end of the year, where at the beginning of the year, my student, I'll never forget her. She was very shy, very self-conscious, obviously, because of the language. But when I would put a Chromebook in front of her and she created either an infographic or a slideshow, she spoke loudly. And
Oh.
clearly, with sharing, showing me that she did grasp the concept and she did learn. Later on at the end of the year, she said, "Mr. Mendoza, I'm ready to present in front of the class." And she got up and presented in the most beautiful language. And
Oh.
she just that growth from the beginning of the year, and those are the things that I love, that the importance of it, and giving the students that choice and in how they want to share their learning. It's so powerful. And so everything that you described, I was like, oh my gosh, that just
Yeah.
describes my experience as well, that I absolutely love. So now let me ask you, as far as that storytelling, and of course talking about creativity, why do you feel that it's very important for students to develop their creativity? And as an educator in the classroom, how might you encourage me or us to go ahead and amplify their creativity?
Hmm. Wow, I almost want a whole day for that. Well, I think that um I think that in terms of like how am I going to approach that with my students and encourage that you know that type of creativity. Um, so as you know, like at Adobe, we have something called the Adobe Creativity Institute. And we were like talking about it before the show because I know that you've seen it in action and you're familiar with it. But w- w- it's been like a crazy ride with like how that has developed, but also like how we have been able to like really teach teachers like how to develop creativity. Um, this creativity institute actually started in Atlanta at Fulton County, and it was during the pandemic, and I was working with this district, and they have all these instructional technology coaches. They have this thing called the Vanguard team. It's like incredible. And they like train all these trainers, and they go out and they do like all this work in these schools, and they all are connected to their schools. And they were asking me, like, they wanted to do from professional development over the summer. And there's like 400 of them. And they were like, well, what are we going to do? And I started having these conversations about creativity in general. And what we started to notice were like there were trends and around like creativity in general. Like, very often, one of the barriers to like having like creativity in our classes is because very often we don't actually know how to develop it. Like, you'll say as a teacher, like, okay, okay, students, like, go, and you're going to create something. And then you're like, and here's a rubric, and creativity is 10% of your grade. And you're like, okay, like, what does creativity sound like? What does it look like? Like, how do you actually like help students develop their skills? Because that's like a skill that can be taught. It's not like you're just creative. Like, yes, some people might like be divergent thinkers and they like it might come a little more natural. They may be willing to take more risks, but like everyone can be creative. And so we started to kind of like look at, well, what does that look like? And so we actually will start off, and like if you've come to one of our institutes, you'll probably have seen this, but we'll start off with like exemplary work with students. And so we will show them like, you have to kind of create the activity so that there's more open-endedness, like create a book cover of such and such. Like, it's not going to be like 3 lines, 8 colors, like you want to be able to like design something where like there's an opportunity for it to look different, but it's like connected to the content. Okay. So like we do that. And then what we do is we show several exemplars, and we will use like a single point rubric and have the criteria listed. And we do this, and we have the participants and the students, because I've taught this way, actually like go through the exemplars, because this is after we've like been going through the criteria. They should at least understand like we're using this as like a teaching method and also as an assessment for them to demonstrate their learning. And so we go through the exemplars with the single point rubric, and then we ask the students to identify what works, what are they exceeding at in those, and what could we improve on. And we do this first with the students, with also the participants, and then this way they have an understanding of like, okay, this is what it is that we are talking about, and this is some of the criteria, and so they can identify what the content is and what the criteria is. And then we say, okay, now you're going to go and you're going to create. And what we do is we create some some constraints, and we're like, okay, you have 10, 15 minutes. We show them like, how to use it through a template, and we have them create their first iteration. And then we ask them to stop, duplicate it, make a new one, and we give them more time. So we have them creating multiple versions of their work digitally, which is kind of the huge benefit of digital, right? Like you're not like cutting, pasting, like you can create many iterations. And then what we have them do is we also have them develop out like their title or whatever the criteria is. We give them like framing and time to like develop out each part of the project. And in between that, we give them time to get feedback from each other. So like, they're constantly creating, stopping, getting feedback from a few people, and then continuing. So I'm not giving the whole process like totally. There's like a whole way of doing it. You have to come to an institute. But by the end of that experience, what's so crazy, and you've done it, so like the participants, because very often, like when you start something creative, you like don't know what you're supposed to do, and you'll have the kids come up and be like, "Is this good enough? Did I get an A? Is this okay?" And so when you create this process and you develop the criteria, and it's very clear, and they're following this process, by the end of the experience, the students come back and they feel supported because they know what to look for. They know what they were supposed to be doing, and they know what success looks like. And they've had several opportunities for low stakes assessment from their peers, so like formative assessments. And so by the time they are ready to like actually submit their work, they feel really confident, and they're able to defend their understanding because they really understand the criteria. So this is like high level. It's hard to explain like this way without visuals and actually going through it. But that's like, it sounds complicated. It's not. It's really like setting up processes, having scaffolding the activities, and providing opportunities for feedback in a low stakes way when you're having kids create. And it's fun, and so it's part of learning. It's not this like add-on. They're learning by doing this because the steps are scaffolded for them. So the creative part is the learning. It's not like the outcome. It's not like, okay, I learned all this and now you're going to make a poster at the end. Like they're learning about all the pieces as they're doing the creation, and they're getting all the feedback. So like, it's really connected to like project-based learning. It's like, it's all connected to like the kind of student-centered stuff that we want to see, that very often is really hard to understand how to develop. Okay.
No.
I hope that would make sense.
Yes, no, but everything that you said is great, because oftentimes I truly believe that there are many people that believe, no, I'm not creative, I can't be creative. And maybe some of it could be that imposter syndrome, because obviously if you're on social media, you see some of the great educators that are out there that are doing some great things and creating just some great things that they're sharing out. And people are like, well, I can't do that. But all it takes is, just like you said, that practice, that iteration, just really understanding the tool, then maybe getting some feedback, and putting it out there again. And I must add, working at that Creative Institute with Tanya, who's here joining us live, was something that was amazing, because you get to see educators, their faces light up, but you also get to see them sort of in that role of the student, because they themselves feel like, did I do this right? Am I on the right track? And it's kind of it's a growing process, but I think once they go through that process, they feel very comfortable, they get out of there, and now they feel like they can take that creative risk in the classroom, because oftentimes they feel like, well, no, I'm not as tech savvy, but now they're willing to take that risk with the little that they know. Oftentimes I think that we don't give our students enough credit that they are, very tech savvy and can, sometimes show us and learn from them, which I did many times. And that's part of the learning process as well, that community, that communication, getting that feedback. And then, it's pretty much you're doing some great stuff there. And so yeah, absolutely. If you get an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen that are joining us, that are listening to the podcast later on, if you ever see that there is an Adobe Creative Institute anywhere near you, I highly recommend that you go to one of those, because you will not come out the same, and you will be very excited about the creative process and bringing that into your classroom. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Oh, we had a little visitor.
I was gonna say, like, it's live.
Yeah, it's live. Hey, don't worry, it happens. We've had the babies come out, we've had dogs barking, we've had all sorts of stuff. So it's all good in that live process. But yeah, absolutely. Like everything that you shared, just spot on, because I got to see that firsthand. And even in the classroom, my experience with the students, I think sometimes teachers, they feel, like I said, a little scared. But, once you get that creative process going, and you start building that community, things just get so much easier in that aspect.
Well, it's really interesting because I'm just thinking, like, this is your 200th episode, right? And there must have been such a learning journey for you from like your first year 200. Like, people will be tuning in now, and it's like, I even said that to you when we came out. I was like, your lighting's so nice. Like, like, I wonder if your lighting was so nice. Like, episode 1, like maybe your mic wasn't right. Like,
Uh,
you know what I mean? Like,
mhm.
we I think sometimes, like, you're right, people will see like a polished product,
Yeah.
but not understand that, like, Fonz, like, you had 200 episodes of practice, and now you kind of have this flow, and you've got this, got a rhythm, you have the lighting, you have, like, even the way that you approach the conversation is probably so much smoother. Like, your processes kind of come down, and it's like great. Well, that's the same thing with everything we do, and we know this as teachers, we know that. But I think that there's this, like, this misconception that, like, we are, like, afraid to take these risks because we see what that, like, amazing
Yep.
outcome looks like down the line. And, like, we have to stop doing that with our students. Like, we need to practice what we preach. We need to be vulnerable and take risks. We need to be able to say, like, this is my first time doing something. Like, it might not be perfect. Like, I feel like that's so important, to be vulnerable, to really be able to help students recognize that, like, when we are vulnerable and try new things, that, and it doesn't necessarily go well, that's okay, because that's what we want them to do. And unfortunately, like, so much of the work that ends up mattering is so high stakes that, like, it does not often provide the culture for that kind of creativity to happen. But I still think those are, like, the little things that we can still control in some capacity, and even if it's in a small way, that we can model in our classrooms, so that we can encourage those learners to take those creative risks. So yeah, I think that that's like a really interesting point that you make. Like, you know, and you see things on social media, on Instagram, and, like, everyone is so polished. But if you really think about where people start versus where they are, and a lot of it is just being consistent, then everyone could take risks and do great things if they, like, work at it.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And I think for myself early on, like you said, if you go back to episode 1 on April 10th of 2020, and then you see this episode, or the previous one, whichever one you go to, you definitely see that progression and that growth. And again, like you said, you learn, and it's just all about iteration. And my goal is always just get 1% better every day at what you're doing. And the same thing in the classroom. And that's why, to me, I always love to amplify creativity, and with the teachers, just sometimes really just having a heart to heart with them and letting them know, because you said something very important. It's everything is so high stakes now. Everything is all about the test. And they start as little as, in third grade all the way to ninth grade. So because of due to that high stakes testing, I feel that many teachers feel that doing an activity such as, an about me, or maybe even just remixing a template, or giving them an opportunity to show their learning, whether it's through video, an infographic, I feel that they feel that it's like, oh, no, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this. And I'm just going to give the worksheet, and I'm good. But I always found it that it helped me in my teaching, where I'm able to bundle more of the standards together in a big creative project, and the students are still learning what they need to learn, but they're doing it in a way that they feel comfortable with. They still have their rubric where the expectations are there for me to be able to see the learning that took place. But one thing that I want to add to this is also the thing that I loved is the evidence of growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, because I have a digital artifact that the student or students have submitted to me, that at any given time, if my principal calls in for a meeting, whether it's, a 504, an IEP, an RTI, and all the rest of the alphabet soup meetings that we have, I have evidence of that student's growth, in my classroom through that creative process as well. And like you said, maybe the student may not be a good test taker on paper, but if you give them a presentation to do, they can show you their learning like nobody's business. If they may be an emergent bilingual and don't feel comfortable, maybe speaking, but I give you an opportunity to create, a slide presentation, you can speak loudly through that, slide presentation, and still show that learning. And so that's the one thing that I absolutely love, that I feel sometimes from third grade to ninth grade might be missing because of the high stakes.
Yeah, it's it's interesting you say that. My daughter's a ninth grader, and today she had her algebra. Hi, Mel. She had her. I see you. My daughter had her ninth grade algebra one. Math has always been like one of the subjects where she had struggled, and so she's taking algebra one, which in the state of Florida you need to pass algebra one final exam to graduate. So it's like really high stakes. And so she did the exam today. It was so sad. We picked her up. She was hysterical, crying. She said to me, she has a different last name. I never changed my into my married name. I'm married, but so she's V. Okay. And so she was at the end of the gym, 300 kids. It's a huge school. And she said it was 60 degrees in there. She was wearing a sweater, but she was sweating the whole time. So she was so nervous. Like, so think about what we do to these kids. She said she was crying in her, this is so sad, in her sweater because it was so hard. And she knew the content. She studied, she had tutors, she had an A going into the exam, but she's not a good test taker. And the pressure was so insane. And she cried when she got out. And she's like, she took the extra time that they gave. Like, she did everything right. And she's like, I don't think I passed. I'm like, well, it's too early to see. They may curve it. Like, we don't know. Like, let's wait. And it's fine. She'll redo it again in September. Like, they give you several opportunities to take it. But how awful that's like, and it's like, she knows the content, but it's a tricky assessment that's really not even meant to show what she knows. It's really meant to see like to curve the it's not meant for the kid. It's so ridiculous. And we still are doing that, right? And that is still what's driving like the decision if she graduates or not. Like, how crazy is that?
Yeah.
And by the way, like, as you were speaking, I was thinking about like, when you're talking about like having this artifact to show growth and to be able to demonstrate like, and I was looking back like at all your like episodes over the last, like, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 episodes. And so much of the conversation that we're having around like ChatGPT and like AI. And like, when we think about it, like, let's be real, like most of the skill sets that like were relevant like 5 months ago are no longer relevant. And like, I think teachers are going to be having like, or if not already, like that as a community, we are having like an existential crisis about like, what are we going to do? And it's like for me, it's like obvious because like I've always done alternative assessments, portfolios, like that's like truly how I've been teaching since the beginning of my teaching career. So like I'm not like freaked out because I'm like, well, yeah, well, we would have an artifact that shows like their demonstration using an infographic where they're like pulling out all the research, and
Mhm.
you'd have them show it visually. And then you're going to have them do like a skeletal, like 3 versions through ChatGPT and pull out all the important parts and like comment on the pieces. And then we would have them create like a what I want to know, what I don't want to know in a video component. And at the end, once they do that and they write the assessment, then if they do write it, they're going to have to go in and like write a do a reflection, explain their process and what they learned and what they got. And like maybe it's not going to be about the writing anymore. Maybe it's going to be like that they understand the writing process and how to tell an argumentative answer, like whatever, like. But ultimately, like they'll put a portfolio together, and then they're going to make a visual portfolio using Adobe Express, and they're going to have images and videos and components, and it's going to be a multimedia assessment. And that's what they're going to do instead now. It's like
Yeah.
that creative piece that like connects all the dots of like all the things that we're talking about like developing creativity and like adding all the demonstrations and showing the process and like having them reflect. Well, that's just good teaching. It always was good teaching. That doesn't change what we've been discussing as good teaching. But now they're going to have to like really demonstrate that. And that's going to be essential, I think. And that's going to have to catch up because there's just no other way.
Yeah,
So,
no. Well, see, going with what you're saying, here in my school district, I had to go and monitor since I work at central office. It's like I just go monitor and help out and see, if any of the campuses need any help during that state testing. And again, going back to what you were saying that happened to your daughter, I mean, for me, seeing a third grader, first time he's taking a state exam, and he is crying uncontrollably because he is stressed out. The fear of failure set in because imagine it's whether it was like, hey, you better do well, or this may happen, or maybe just natural stress from what this the stakes that this test has. I mean, it just really broke my heart, really broke my heart. And I wanted to kind of give a shout out here also to Jared, who's joining us, who says also that his son doesn't do well with multiple choice assessments, so give him something there where he can create using Book Creator or something else that
yeah.
they excel in. So I wanted to add to that, like, for example, those skills, that test, once you're in high school, yes, everything's measured through standardized tests, but when you get into the real world and into college, when I did it, it was, yeah, you have tests, for your content area. But when I got to my master's, it was, you're just going to submit your portfolio. Pretty much every class that you take, every assignment that you have, those are your learning artifacts that shows that you've submitted this to me, that you've shown mastery during this class. You're going to put it in a portfolio. And at the end, we didn't even have to do a capstone. We didn't have to do any comprehensive. My final was just submitting my portfolio and making sure that I just tied it to my matrix, and that was it. They're like, you're done. And at the end, their goal was, at the end, we just want you to have a portfolio that you can present at a job interview where it really matters. And I thought that that was so creative. Now, in my doctoral courses, it was all writing, writing, writing. Then I had a professor that all of a sudden, one semester, she says, hey, I'm going to give you all a choice board, and you've got this or this or this or this or a combination of these. uh, Tanya, I'm not going to lie to you. My colleagues there in that class, all educators, years of education experience, their eyes were just like a deer in the headlights look, because they're like, what do you mean a choice board? Because we're so used to just tell me what I need to do so I can get the A, and what do I need to do? But when you give them the choice, they were like freaking out. Like, I don't understand. So I can do this or this. And I was like, wow. The next semester, I had the same prof, and she said, oh, this semester, I'm doing ungrading. You're going to grade yourself. You're going to create your own rubric. But these are the assignments you need to submit to me. And based on what you give me that your grade, or what you think your grade should be, if I feel that maybe you're saying, oh, you're just, turning in something that's just subpar, but you're giving yourself 100, you're going to need to explain to me and tell me why you feel you should get that grade to justify that. And I mean, we're talking doctoral level course, choice boards, and so on. And I feel like if they could do it in the doctoral, programs, why can't we give more choice to our students in our school setting, K through 12?
Well, and so let's take that one step further. Like I'm an educator. I worked in education and I guess in academia for, I guess, if we look at it from that perspective, for most of my career. 4 years ago, I moved into like working in a corporate setting, and I work at a huge company. And I'm going to be like really like frank about this. Like, I've never had to take a multiple choice assessment in my job. Like, like the skill sets that actually are valuable are like the ones that we're not really like developing with kids. Like, students need to be able to think on their toes, be able to make decisions without like all the information, and be able to understand like where to find the right information. They have to be able to like, there are all these pieces that like because what happens is like we're not providing kids with enough opportunities to like think critically about the work that they're doing, and then like feel that it's okay to take risks and then learn through like potentially not doing well on something. And so like that's why there's like this like, what do I need to do to get an A? Like, and by the time they hit 11th, 12th grade, they are like the ones that are masterful of playing the game of education or game of school are really going to be successful. But that does not necessarily equate that they're going to be successful like once they hit like the workforce. Like they might excel in like some elements, but that doesn't mean that like they're going to be able to think like entrepreneurially, or like there's so many things that like we can be doing that like develop that. And when I worked in education, it really dawned on me, like, for the most part, like how many teachers have actually like, we talk about like we're preparing kids for the real world. And I'm not saying that like education is not the real world, but like sometimes you have to also, I've also like kind of come to this realization as I've moved out of academia, like we as teachers, like I never worked in a corporate setting before working in a corporate setting. So like, how would I know what skills that I even needed to develop? And what we have experienced in education for the longest time is the system that has like worked in academia. And then like now we're saying like, well, the system doesn't work, but like we don't actually necessarily know what that system needs to be. So we're stuck in like a holding pattern, right? I don't have the answers for this. This is just like my brain thinking in overdrive. But like that's what I've noticed, like as someone who's kind of like been in the classroom for all these years, like worked as a consultant, like did all the work in academia, and now has work like experience in like a different setting. So I'm not saying it in a negative way. Like it's not like a bad thing. It's just like, it's kind of a reality. Like, how do we break that cycle? Right? Like where that is like, how are we going to gain that experience? Like even as educators. And I think there's like opportunities to learn about like processes. There's opportunities to like, to learn on ourselves. Just watching these podcasts, like working outside of academia, like listening to podcasts from like other like avenues or industry. Like I think that matters, but ultimately we also have to work within our confounds and like what we're told we need to be doing to develop kids. So it's kind of frustrating. I feel like we could talk about it in forever, but what can we control, right? Control the opportunities we give kids. We can control the options. And, yes, you know what? Having kids have choice is a small thing we can do, and it goes a long way.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that 100%. All right. Well, now, before we start wrapping up, as we're getting closer to ending the show, but, going back to the conversation as far as creativity in the classroom, and I know you talked about it, you brought it up, of course, we've got AI and we've got AI tools and so on. So I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are, especially, with tools such as Dolly. Of course, you've got Adobe Firefly, you've got, Adobe Express, and so many other tools that are out there. Where do you see, these tools helping out in that creative process, or do you see them maybe hindering them a little bit? Because we know that there might be teachers that say, well, this is already going to do that for them. So are they being really creative still? So what are your thoughts just surrounding AI creativity in the K-12 space?
So it's a good question. I don't want to jump into like conclusions quite yet. I think that we are going to have to kind of enter this space like with our eyes wide open and really explore like what is working, what is not working. I think sometimes we go to like extremes immediately. We're like, I love this. This is amazing. Like, we have to do it this way. And then we will like go to the other extremes, like ban everything, block it down, don't let anyone use it. And so like, I think what we'll have to do is like, look at how we're going to use this ethically, because one of the things that like, I could speak as a, like, not as Adobe, but like what I am seeing through Adobe is we're really, really dedicated to like an ethical approach to AI. And that's why like they have been kind of releasing it the way that they have. They are actually like paying creators if their work gets picked up through Adobe Stock. Like they are thinking about like the representation and like the way that you put in your queries and like what pops up. Like they have done like they really take this really serious. So like there's going to have to be like serious conversations, just like we did when like Google came out and like we were like, oh my God, Google and like Wikipedia is terrible, block it. It's like, it's actually not that different. I mean, it is very different, but like it's more advanced. But like the conversations we had then are similar to the ones that we're going to have now. And yes, like we had to like learn to navigate it and adapt and like have kids think about digital citizenship. And we're going to have to do the same even more. We're going to have to talk about bias and how to identify bias. And we're going to have to talk about like how to think critically. And then we're going to look at it and be like, well, when can we use it? How can we ask better questions? How can we use it as a learning tool? How do we know to triangulate what it's saying so that we don't take it for face value? How are we going to use this as an assistant? As a creator, it's going to be super helpful to help me design, to help me take my imagination and tell stories and like put in really good queries and be able to like tell visual stories. Like I think that there's a lot of potential, and in the same breath, like we're going to also have to be really aware and not like blinded by new shiny things, and be still critical and teach those critical skills. So like, because I do believe that like this is the new literacy. It's no longer going to be like, in the past was like, can we read? Can we not read? Okay. Can they search? Can they not search? Okay. I think like now it's going to be like, can they use AI to help them or replace them like in the workforce? And like, that will be a reality that won't go away. So we are going to have to address these pieces and not like stick our heads in the sand, and in the same breath be like aware of like what some of the like potential pitfalls are, and like also think about like what jobs are not going to exist, and now like really try to steer our students, our children, our into industries that like they can use it for work. So that's my thing.
No, that's great. And thank you so much for sharing that, because you hit on a couple of things too that, the way that Adobe is rolling these things out, the tools and so on, and just being very cautious. I mean, there are so many platforms that have come up since December, and everybody, like I said, sometimes we just get attracted by the shiny new thing, and we want to be the first one to use it, and we want to be the first one to put things out and so on. But then we don't take into account, the other side, the data privacy, protecting our children, protecting ourselves. I mean, teachers, imagine all the clicks and sites that they visit on a daily basis, the students also, whether it's at school or at home. So we want to make sure we're very cautious with that. But also, like you said, the query, the searching, make sure that we take care of any biases, make sure that we know how to input a prompt, make sure that we get the right output. So there's a lot of skills there that we're still going to need to learn, and we need to elevate our game in that. And then you mentioned too, I mean, the future of work and the future of learning. Definitely the tools are going to get better and better. And so we definitely need to introduce those tools to our students, but in a responsible way that is age appropriate. And then we're still going to be exposing them to what they will be needing as they continue to move forward. So yeah, definitely excited about that. And again, Tanya, I mean, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your insight. More than anything, your also your passion, your enthusiasm, your genuineness, and the work that you do for Adobe, and of course, being able to be part of this is something that is so big here in the Adobe space for education, is just wonderful. And your message of amplifying creativity, not only yourself but all the Adobe, creative evangelists that are out there, everybody that works, and the work that you're doing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And, I wish you all the best at this, because this is something that we definitely need. And I'm all for it. And I'm the biggest fan of it too, as well. So
Oh,
thank
thank you. Thank you. And congratulations again on 200. It's so amazing. That's amazing. What a huge accomplishment. So thank
Yes.
you for having me. And thank you to everyone who joins and all the work you do. And happy teacher. Oh my God, what a special week. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week. I feel so honored to be here. So thank you so much. And like, yeah, there's just so much more work that we can do.
Excellent. Well, again, before we wrap up, we always love to end the show with the last three questions. And here we have Tanya Gonzalez. She was already really excited. She was like, hey, the big three. And here she is. She knows that. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right. So, Tanya, the first question for you or the first question, in the current state of education, what would you say is your current edu kryptonite?
My edu kryptonite. Okay, that would be the thing that I
Makes Superman weak, that you're like,
makes
I don't
yeah,
want to hear. Yeah.
that I don't want to hear it. Oh, okay. Well, it's kind of controversial, but I'm just gonna go there. Like, I live in the state of Florida. I'm I'm like super grossed out by like book banning and like just homophobia and transphobia and like all of those pieces. Like I can't like, and I'm not saying it in like it's awful and it's making me like want to throw up every time I open up the news. It's so awful. So I know that's happening in other states as well, but like I'd say like it's not that I don't want to hear it. It's like I want it to go away and I want people to like love our children and like I want this madness to stop. So that would be my number one.
All right. Good answer. Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing that. All right. Question number 2 is, if you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. I guess in that vein, it would be just like love is love. I don't know. Like maybe right now, just like let's like, can't we get along? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. My brain is going there, but like, I don't know. Just we gotta love our kids. We can't do this. We gotta stop. I don't know.
Uh,
I don't know. That's like very broad, but
That's
something
okay. That's okay. Maybe we can do a series. Like,
thematic. Yeah.
sometimes on the highway there would be like 3 that go together and like that. So we can definitely set that up. So good answer. All right. And the last question, Tanya, is, what's your favorite hobby or pastime outside of work?
Oh, outside of work, I'm such a workaholic. Wow. Oh, okay. Well, I love to work out, which sounds really sad, maybe, but like I love it. I love to go on hikes. I love to like, I literally love my Peloton and I can't, like, I'm obsessed. I work out like 6 days a week. So I think that that's maybe my hobby. I can't believe that that's the thing I do and I love, but I really love it.
Excellent. Hey, great answer. Great answer. All right. Well, Tanya, sorry. It's been a wonderful conversation with you. Again, thank you so much for being here and again sharing all just the Adobe awesome sauce, just your heart here as well, because I definitely, ever since I first, started following you on Twitter, you just definitely just have this, you just exude this just excitement, and you really pump people up, and just this joy that you have. So thank you for being that way. Because we definitely need, more joyous hearts like yourself to just be sharing just all this creative magic that you do. So keep doing what you're doing. And also thank you again for being the 200th guest. It is an honor. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. And for my friends that are joining us in the chat, we had Jared, we had Tanya, we had Mel that stopped by too as well. And for all of you guys that are watching, that will be watching this on the replay, listening to it later, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for making my EdTech life what it is today. We do what we do for you. And always remember that our mission is to connect educators and creators one show at a time. And again, please make sure that you stop by our website at myedtech.life, myedtech.life, where you can check out this amazing episode and the other 199 amazing episodes with wonderful educators and creators that you can take some knowledge nuggets from and sprinkle them on to what you are already doing great. And also, if you'd love to contribute to our mission of connecting educators and creators one show at a time, please stop by our merch store. We know that summer conference season is here. We know that winter is right around the corner. I know we just started summer, but winter conference season. So we've got shirts, hats, sweaters. Just stop by. We definitely appreciate that. And all of that goes back to our show. So again, as always, thank you so much. And my friends, until next time, don't forget, stay techie.